I bought a dusty, beat-up camera for $20 at a flea market, and that tiny decision ended up making me a millionaire. It was one of those slow Sunday mornings when I had nothing planned, the kind where you wandered just to kill time. I decided to hit the local flea market, the kind that smells like kettle corn and old wood, where every table is piled high with random objects people are desperate to get rid of. There were rusty tools, old vinyl records, weird porcelain cats, nothing that screamed life-changing. Then I saw it. A scratched-up Canon DSLR, missing its lens cap, with a faded strap that looked like it had been on more adventures than I had in my whole life. I picked it up and felt the weight in my hands, solid but tired. The seller, a guy in his 60s wearing a baseball cap that had seen better days, glanced at me and said, $20 and it's yours. Haven't touched it in years. I didn't even know if it would work, but something about it, maybe the mystery, maybe the bargain, made me pull out a crumpled 20 from my wallet. I walked away thinking I'd just bought an expensive paperweight. I had no idea I was holding the first tool in building an entirely new life. When I got home, I set the camera on my desk like a strange artifact I didn't fully understand. I plugged in the charger, the port was dusty, the cable frayed, and left it for a couple of hours while I made coffee and scrolled my phone. Honestly, I half expected the battery to be dead forever. But when I pressed the power button, the little green light blinked, and the screen came to life. It was cracked on the corner, the colors slightly washed out, and the autofocus made a grinding sound like it was chewing gravel. But it worked. I remember laughing out loud because somehow this $20 gamble had already beaten my expectations. That evening, the sky outside my apartment was on fire with orange and pink streaks. I grabbed the camera, stepped into the park across the street, and started shooting. I had no clue about aperture or ISO. I just pointed at things that looked beautiful. A couple walking their golden retriever, kids chasing a soccer ball, the skyline cutting into the sunset. One of those photos, the dog mid-run, ears flying, tongue out, pure joy on its face, was about to take on a life of its own. At that moment, though, it was just a picture I thought looked nice. Later that night, I transferred the photos to my old laptop. Most were crooked, blurry, or too dark, but that shot of the dog, it felt alive. You could almost hear the paws hitting the grass. On a whim, I uploaded it to a free stock photo site. No grand plan, no expectation of money. I just thought maybe someone will use it for a blog or something. Then I closed my laptop and forgot about it. A week later, I woke up to an email with the subject line, "Your photo is trending." When I opened it, I saw numbers that didn't make sense. 1,000 downloads in 7 days. The photo had been shared on Instagram, Facebook, even used in a few memes. People from different countries were commenting things like, "This dog just made my day," and "Who took this shot?" It was surreal. I was just some random guy with a $20 camera, but suddenly, strangers around the world were looking at my work. That's when the thought hit me. If one random photo could reach this many people, what could I do if I actually tried? That single question wouldn't leave my head. For the next few days, I kept replaying it like a song stuck on repeat. I started watching YouTube tutorials about photography, aperture, shutter speed, composition, all terms that had meant nothing to me a week earlier. But there was one idea that kept tugging at me: video. Photos were cool, but videos? They could tell full stories. So one Saturday afternoon, I asked my friend Mark, the kind of guy who's always doing something ridiculous on a skateboard, if I could film him at the local park. He shrugged, said sure, and started doing tricks while I stumbled around trying to keep him in focus. The footage was shaky, the colors were off, and my editing skills were basically non-existent. But when I uploaded that 1-minute clip to YouTube, something strange happened. 2 weeks later, it had over 50,000 views. I had no following, no marketing, no plan. Yet there it was. People were commenting, "Post more," and "You've got an eye for this." For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Momentum.
Momentum is addictive. Once you feel it, you can't go back to standing still. I started carrying the camera everywhere, to work, to coffee shops, even on late-night walks. Every scene became a potential shot. A street performer juggling under neon lights, rain dripping off a bus stop sign, a kid laughing while chasing pigeons. I wasn't just looking anymore. I was seeing. Then came the night that changed everything again. I was heading home when I noticed a small crowd gathered near the pier. At the center was a man playing a violin, but not just any violin. It was covered in LEDs that pulsed with every note. The music was hypnotic, the lights reflecting off the water in bursts of color. I hit record. No tripod, no fancy setup, just raw, unplanned footage. I edited it that same night and posted it to YouTube, titling it, "The Most Beautiful Street Performance You'll Ever See." By morning, it had 200,000 views. By the end of the week, 2.4 million. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a hobby anymore. This could be my career. The morning after that viral video, my inbox was a war zone, in the best way. Emails from people I didn't know were pouring in. Musicians asking if I could film their shows. Small businesses wanting promo videos. Even a wedding couple who said, "We'll fly you out if you can capture our day the way you did that violinist." It was overwhelming. I'd gone from zero to in demand in less than a month. But there was one email that stopped me cold. It was from a small media company in Los Angeles. They wrote, "We've been following your videos. Let's talk about a paid collaboration." Paid. Until that moment, every photo and video I'd posted had been for free. I hadn't even thought about monetizing. It felt like a dream too big to entertain. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at that $20 flea market camera on my desk. I realized this beat-up piece of metal and plastic was no longer just a camera. It was my golden ticket. Flying to Los Angeles felt like stepping into another world. I'd never even been on the West Coast before. My entire life until then had been small-town routines and paycheck-to-paycheck survival. The media company's office was modest, not some glass skyscraper, but a creative loft space buzzing with energy. Posters of viral videos hung on the walls. People were editing on giant monitors, sipping cold brew, moving like they were plugged into electricity. They didn't waste time. "We want you to create short-form videos for our clients," the manager said. "You clearly know how to capture moments that people feel." The offer was $3,000 for a short project. $3,000. For me, that was almost 2 months of rent. I accepted on the spot. For the next week, I shot in diners, skate parks, and rooftops. I learned how to plan shots instead of just stumbling into them. I learned how to direct people, how to edit faster, how to tell micro-stories in 30 seconds. When the campaign went live, the videos performed better than they had projected, triple the expected engagement. The company was thrilled. And I realized something that both excited and scared me. I wasn't an amateur anymore. I was officially a professional.
After that project, doors started flying open faster than I could process. The company introduced me to a local influencer who needed a videographer. She had 500,000 followers and wanted someone to capture her day-in-the-life content with more cinematic flair. I charged $500 for the gig, terrified she'd say no, but she didn't even blink. When she posted the video, her fans flooded the comments. "This feels like a movie! Whoever filmed this is insanely talented." She tagged me. Overnight, my Instagram jumped from a few hundred followers to several thousand. My inbox exploded again with requests. Models, musicians, small brands, even a guy who just wanted a cool video proposal for his girlfriend. Every time I pressed record, it felt like I was adding another brick to something bigger, a career, a brand, a life I hadn't dared to dream of 6 months earlier. But success is a weird thing. It doesn't arrive neatly packaged. It crashes into your life, messy and overwhelming. And I was about to find out just how messy it could get. The pressure started creeping in, quietly at first. I was juggling 5 clients at once, barely sleeping, editing until sunrise, and running on gas station coffee. My laptop fan sounded like it was about to take off into orbit, and my $20 flea market camera, well, it was hanging on by duct tape and prayers. Then, disaster struck. One night, while filming at a rooftop party in LA, the camera slipped from my hand. I watched in slow motion as it hit the concrete floor. The lens cracked, the body dented, and when I picked it up, dead. My heart sank. That camera wasn't just equipment, it was the thing that had started this entire journey. Losing it felt like losing a piece of myself. But here's the crazy part. The influencer client from earlier saw what happened and said, "Why are you still using that relic? You need to upgrade." 2 days later, she wired me $2,000 as an advance for our next project. "Get yourself a real camera," she said. I held that money in my hands and realized the $20 camera had carried me as far as it could. Now it was time to step into a new chapter. Walking into the camera store with $2,000 in my pocket felt surreal. Just a few months ago, I couldn't even afford a new pair of shoes without stressing about rent. Now, I was about to buy professional gear, the kind I used to drool over on YouTube. The salesman handed me a sleek DSLR with a crisp lens. I turned it on, looked through the viewfinder, and the clarity hit me like a punch. The colors were sharper, the depth richer. It was like stepping from black and white into full-blown IMAX. When I shot my first project with it, the difference was night and day. Clients noticed instantly. "This looks next level," one of them said. Suddenly, I wasn't just the scrappy underdog with a lucky viral video. I was delivering quality that could rival production studios. But with new gear came new expectations. Clients were paying more, which meant they wanted more. Bigger concepts, faster turnarounds, flawless execution. And while part of me was terrified of failing, another part was electrified. I had the tools. I had the momentum. Now the question was, could I scale this into something even bigger than myself? Scaling up meant one thing. I couldn't do it all alone anymore. Up until then, I'd been a one-man band, filming, editing, emailing clients, even lugging around lighting gear by myself. But the workload was piling up, and I was burning out. So I made a risky move. I hired help. A college kid named Jason who had been DMing me nonstop about wanting to learn filmmaking. At first, I could barely afford to pay him, but I figured if I invested in people the way others had invested in me, it might just pay off. And it did. With Jason handling some of the grunt work, setting up gear, sorting footage, handling smaller edits, I was free to focus on the bigger creative vision. Our turnaround times doubled. Clients noticed. Within 3 months, we weren't just saying yes to projects, we were choosing them. The biggest breakthrough came when a clothing brand reached out with a $15,000 budget for a campaign. That number floored me. It was more than I'd made in an entire year at my old job. When they wired the deposit, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at my bank account. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something real.
That clothing brand campaign turned out to be the turning point. We shot in abandoned warehouses, city rooftops, and even rented a vintage car for one of the sequences. I directed models, coordinated with stylists, and managed a small crew for the first time in my life. It was chaos. Lights tipping over, permits almost falling through, a model showing up 2 hours late. But when I looked through the lens, I knew we were capturing magic. When the final cut went live, it exploded. The brand's sales skyrocketed. They sent me a thank you email that basically said, "This campaign saved our quarter." And just like that, my reputation shifted. I wasn't just the kid who stumbled into a viral video anymore. I was a filmmaker businesses could trust with big money. Soon, other brands started circling. A sneaker company, a startup beverage line, even a record label asking about a music video. But behind the adrenaline rush, there was a quiet voice in my head whispering, "You've come this far, but do you really believe you deserve it?" Because deep down, I was still that broke kid with a $20 camera.
That voice in my head got louder when I went home for Thanksgiving. Sitting at the same old kitchen table where I used to eat ramen, my parents asked how things were going. When I told them I'd just finished a $15,000 campaign, my dad actually laughed. Not out of malice, just disbelief. You? Making that kind of money with a camera? It stung. I realized that no matter how far I'd come, to them, I was still the kid who barely scraped by at minimum wage jobs. But instead of letting it crush me, I used it as fuel. I wanted to prove, not to them, not to clients, but to myself, that this wasn't luck. This was real. So I pushed harder. I invested in better equipment. I expanded my tiny team. I studied storytelling, lighting, editing, every craft detail I could sharpen. And slowly, the imposter syndrome began to fade. Because every time a client renewed a contract, every time a stranger shared my work online, every time a new opportunity arrived in my inbox, I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
By the time the next year rolled around, everything felt different. I wasn't chasing scraps anymore. I was negotiating contracts. I was turning down projects that didn't excite me. My calendar was booked months in advance, and the numbers in my bank account, well, they still didn't feel real. Then came the email that changed everything. A major streaming platform wanted me to direct a short documentary. Budget? $100,000. I remember staring at the screen numb. This wasn't just a gig. This was validation on a scale I couldn't have imagined when I picked up that $20 flea market camera. We shot for weeks, traveling across states, capturing stories bigger than any I'd told before. When the documentary premiered, it didn't just do well, it blew up. Critics praised it, audiences connected with it, and overnight, my name started circulating in rooms I never dreamed I'd enter. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just surviving, or freelancing, or hustling anymore. I had built a career, a life, a legacy in the making.
Looking back now, it still feels unreal. I went from being broke, working dead-end jobs, eating dollar-menu dinners, to traveling the country, working with brands, and directing projects with six-figure budgets. And all of it started with a beat-up $20 camera at a flea market. The biggest lesson I've learned? You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need perfect gear, the right connections, or some grand master plan. What you do need is the courage to start and the grit to keep going when everything feels impossible. If I had waited until I was ready, I'd still be stuck in the same old job, scrolling through other people's success stories. Instead, I picked up that camera, pressed record, and let momentum carry me forward. So if you're sitting there wondering if you should take that first step, do it. Because you never know. That tiny, shaky step could be the beginning of $1 million journey.